I remember the exact moment. The ground beneath me started to crack. I was in the kitchen, rummaging through the basket of avocados, trying to pick out the perfect one. The sun was just starting to dip, casting a warm glow through the window. It was an ordinary Tuesday. But my son's voice on the phone was anything but ordinary. "Mom, you need to come to the hospital." Dad collapsed at work. His words felt like a punch to my stomach, and I froze. I didn't understand at first. I thought it was some kind of mistake, but it wasn't. When I arrived at the hospital, the doctor told me it was a massive heart attack. Bob was gone. Just like that. My husband of 38 years gone. People say grief comes in waves. But for me, it was different. I didn't cry at the funeral. No, not because I didn't love him, but because I felt something. I wasn't ready to admit relief. And that thought, that strange, inexplicable relief, gnawed at me. I kept thinking about all the Tuesdays, every week, rain or shine. Bob went to the bank, religious about it like clockwork. The ritual was so ingrained in him, so secure. When I'd ask him why, he'd smile and kiss my forehead, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. Just keeping our future secure. He'd say, I believed him, didn't I? I had to. Bob was an accountant. After all, numbers were his language, his passion. He handled the bills, taxes, and retirement savings. It was all supposed to be sorted. But now, as I stood at that hospital door, knowing he was gone, I had no idea what I was about to find out. What if that sense of security Bob promised me was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie? The days after Bob's funeral felt like a blur. I went through the motions, thank you cards, casseroles, and endless condolences. But I couldn't shake that feeling of emptiness, the sensation that something was off, something I hadn't yet discovered. And then, 3 days later, a letter arrived. It was plain, unmarked, the envelope a stark white, with my name typed on it. I opened it with trembling hands, unsure of what it could be. The letter inside was from the First National Bank. Dear Mrs. Thompson, we wish to express our condolences regarding your husband's passing. Per the terms of the safe deposit box lease, we must inform you that you are listed as the secondary holder. The box has been paid through the end of the year. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to arrange access. I read the letter again, then again, hoping it would make sense the second time. We had a safe deposit box? Bob had never once mentioned it. Not in 38 years of marriage had he ever mentioned a thing about it. Not once had he said a word about any secret savings or hidden accounts. And now, after his death, this? I called the bank that afternoon, my voice steadier than I felt. The woman on the phone confirmed it. Yes, we had a safe deposit box. Yes, I was listed as the co-holder. Yes, I could access it. But why had Bob kept this a secret? Why hadn't he shared this with me? The woman scheduled me to come in 2 days later. 2 days. I spent those 2 days moving through the house like a ghost, opening drawers he'd organized, looking at files with his handwriting, the ones he'd kept so neat and orderly. But everything felt wrong. Like a stage set designed to look exactly like my life, but something deeper was off. What could Bob have hidden in that box? And why did he keep it from me for all those years? Thursday arrived, cold and damp, with clouds hanging low in the sky as if even the weather could sense the weight of what was to come. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing my navy blazer and slacks, something sturdy, something that could shield me from whatever was about to be unveiled. David had offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I needed to do alone. The bank was a sleek, modern building, glass and steel, cold and impersonal. Inside, the atmosphere felt sterile, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. A woman in her 50s, Patricia, greeted me with a polite, practiced sympathy. She led me through a sterile hallway to the vault, where the safe deposit boxes lined the walls like silent sentinels, waiting to reveal their secrets. Patricia handed me the key to box 847 and gestured toward a small room. I'll give you privacy, Mrs. Thompson, she said, her voice soft yet professional. I nodded, too numb to speak. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the table and for a long moment simply stared at it. It was so plain, so ordinary. Nothing about it screamed of the devastation it contained. I felt a chill as I unlocked it, the metal lid giving a small, reluctant creak as it opened. Inside there were folders. Lots of them stacked neatly, as if Bob had spent years organizing his secrets, planning for this moment when the truth would finally come to light. I took out the first folder, labeled Investments. My hand shook as I opened it, and with each page my heart sank deeper. Pages and pages of bad investments. Failed stocks, risky ventures that had collapsed into nothing, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars with them. But none of these accounts were mine. They were all in Bob's name, only his name. The second folder was even worse. Home equity loans. 3 of them, each taken out against the house. Our home, the place I raised our children, planted roses, and painted the kitchen 3 different colors. The place where we spent 38 years building our lives together. Total debt, $270,000. I felt the room closing in around me, the walls pressing tighter, suffocating me. But it was the third folder that nearly shattered me completely. Credit cards. Not just 1 or 2 but 15. All in my name. Cards I had never opened, never seen before. There they were, my name, my social security number, and my forged signature. A total balance of $96,000. Bob had stolen my identity. My husband, the man who held my hand through the hardest moments of my life, had used me to commit fraud. I sat there for what felt like hours, just breathing, trying to process what I was seeing. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough that I could hardly wrap my mind around it. At the bottom of the box was an envelope. Thick, cream-colored, with my name written in Bob's handwriting. I opened it carefully, my hands trembling, knowing this was the last piece of the puzzle. The letter inside was simple, but the words cut deep. What could Bob possibly say in this letter? Would it explain the unexplainable, or would it be another lie? I read the letter 3 times, hoping it would somehow change, hoping that with each reading it would make more sense. But it didn't. The words were the same, cold and final, written by a man I thought I knew but now didn't recognize. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And you found the box. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, I know, but it's all I have. 5 years ago, I made an investment I was sure would pay off. It didn't. I tried to fix it. Every Tuesday I went to the bank trying to restructure, trying to find a way out. But I just dug us deeper. The house loans, the credit cards in your name, I did it to buy time. I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know. I was wrong. By the time you read this, we're probably bankrupt. The house will likely go into foreclosure. Your credit is destroyed. I know you'll hate me. You should. I was trying to protect you from my mistakes, but all I did was make you pay for them. I'm sorry. I love you. I sat there for what felt like an eternity. The letter crumpled in my hands. So many emotions hit me at once: betrayal, anger, grief, confusion. But most of all I felt emptiness. Bob, the man who had promised me security, had been lying to me for years. He hadn't been keeping our future secure. He had been dismantling it, piece by piece, while I blindly trusted him. For 38 years I had loved him with all my heart. I had given him everything: my trust, my loyalty, my belief in us. And now, in his final moments, he left me with a mountain of debt, ruined credit, and a life built on lies. Was he really trying to protect me? Or was he just trying to protect himself? I folded the letter carefully, placing it back into the envelope, and set it down beside the pile of documents. Everything that had been built between us, every promise, every shared dream, felt like it was crumbling to dust in my hands. But as the shock started to fade, something else began to rise within me. It was anger, yes, but it was also a quiet, steady resolve. I wasn't going to let this be my ending. Bob's betrayal wasn't going to define me. It had broken me, yes, but I could rebuild. I stood up, my hands steady, my resolve growing. I walked out of that room with my spine straight and my jaw set. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to fight. What would I do next? How could I rebuild a life that had been destroyed in an instant? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't giving up. When I returned home, I didn't feel the sense of comfort I'd once had. The house, the place where Bob and I had built our lives, felt cold and unfamiliar. David was already there, waiting for me. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed, and I could see the same weariness in his gaze that had been creeping up on me in the last few days. "Mom!" he said, his voice quiet. We need to talk about Dad's finances. My heart sank. I knew where this was going. I sat down at the kitchen table, and he spread out the papers, bank statements, investment reports, documents that hadn't once been a part of our lives. I glanced at them, the numbers swirling in my mind. David's voice was calm, but I could hear the strain beneath it. Did you know Dad had 3 different checking accounts? 3? I asked, feeling a lump form in my throat. No. We only had the joint account. It was always just us. David pointed to a statement on the page. This account has been empty for 6 months. This one was closed last year. And this one? He paused and looked up at me, his face pale. This one has a balance of $43. The words hit me like a freight train. Our finances, the security we thought we had, were an illusion. That's not possible, I said, my voice shaking. Our retirement account alone should have been worth more than $400,000. David's face tightened, and I could see the realization sinking in. Mom, I can't find it. Any of it. I couldn't breathe. My world, which had been turned upside down by Bob's death, now felt like it was being torn apart further. How had I missed all of this? How had Bob hidden it so well? That night, I lay in bed beside an empty side where Bob used to sleep, staring at the ceiling, consumed by thoughts. The shock and disbelief still gripped me. But there was something else too. A creeping feeling of anger, of betrayal that I couldn't shake. What would I find when I opened that safe deposit box? Would it explain all the unanswered questions that had been gnawing at me since Bob's death? Thursday came, and with it the weight of anticipation. The morning was heavy with the kind of cold that settles deep in your bones. I dressed quickly, my hands steady despite the tremor in my heart. I had no idea what I was about to uncover, but the reality of it hit me. I had spent 38 years trusting Bob, believing in the life we built together. And now I was standing on the edge of something much darker. David had offered to accompany me to the bank, but I declined. There were things I needed to face alone. The bank's modern exterior, with its sleek glass and steel, seemed a poor reflection of the emotional turmoil I was carrying inside. Felt sterile, too perfect. Inside, the atmosphere was somber, quiet. The woman who greeted me, Patricia, led me down a long hallway, the clacking of our footsteps the only sound that filled the air. I followed her into the vault area, where rows of safe deposit boxes stood like silent sentinels. She handed me the key to box 847, and I carried it, its weight more symbolic than I realized. Patricia stepped aside and gestured to a small room with a table and chairs, offering me privacy. I took a deep breath as I entered the room, the door clicking softly behind me. The box seemed to pulse with hidden truths, its simple metal exterior belying the complexity of its contents. I sat down and unlocked it, the sound of the lid lifting carrying the weight of years. Inside there were folders, each one carefully labeled. My hands shook as I reached for the first one, titled Investments. Opening it, I saw page after page of losses, failed stocks, bad investments, and risky ventures that had drained money from our future, from the life we were supposed to share. But they weren't our investments. They were Bob's. All in his name, with no mention of me. No mention of our future. The second folder was worse. Home equity loans. 3 of them. Each one taken out against our house, the home I had worked so hard to create. The place I had nurtured my children, planted my garden, and spent countless nights holding hands with the man I thought I knew. The loans totaled $270,000. Our home, the very foundation of our life together, was now at risk. But it was the third folder that truly shattered me. Credit cards. Not 1 but 15. In my name. I had never signed a single application, never authorized a single card. Yet there it was, my name, my social security number, and my forged signature on every single one. The total debt? $96,000. Bob had stolen my identity. He had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even comprehend. My heart felt heavy as I sat there, the air thick with disbelief. I had loved him, trusted him, and now all that remained were the ashes of a marriage I had believed to be solid. At the bottom of the box there was one last envelope. Thick, cream-colored, with my name written in Bob's familiar handwriting. I opened it, my hands shaking as I pulled out the letter inside. This, I realized, was the final truth Bob had left for me. What did Bob's final words hold? Would they answer my questions or just add to the chaos he had left behind? I held the letter in my hands, the familiar, meticulous handwriting almost cruel in its calmness. Bob had always been precise, organized to the point where everything he did felt controlled, measured. But now his words seemed to carry an unbearable weight, like the final confession of a man who had lived a lie for far too long. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And you found the box. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, I know, but it's all I have. 5 years ago, I made an investment I was sure would pay off. It didn't. I tried to fix it. Every Tuesday I went to the bank trying to restructure, trying to find a way out. But I just dug us deeper. The house loans, the credit cards in your name, I did it to buy time. I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know. I was wrong. By the time you read this, we're probably bankrupt. The house will likely go into foreclosure. Your credit is destroyed. I know you'll hate me. You should. I was trying to protect you from my mistakes, but all I did was make you pay for them. I'm sorry. I love you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter in silence. The words blurred together as I tried to make sense of it all. Bob had done this to protect me? He'd buried us in debt, ruined our financial future, and betrayed me. All in the name of protecting me? But I wasn't sure if I could believe that. There was something deeper, something more hidden beneath these words that didn't sit right. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. My emotions felt tangled, anger, confusion, and a deep sadness that lingered like a shadow. How could the man I had shared my life with, the man I had trusted with everything, have done this? How had I missed it? The anger inside me started to rise. I had been a part of this marriage for decades, and yet in his final moments Bob had kept me in the dark. His last act of betrayal had been to leave me with a mountain of debt and a destroyed future. But it wasn't over. I wasn't going to let him have the final say in this. The room felt like it was closing in around me, the air thick and suffocating. But despite it all, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Bob's mistakes define me. I couldn't. I had to fight for myself and for my future. There had to be a way out of this mess. I stood up, my body stiff but resolute. I walked out of the bank with my head held high, determined to face whatever came next. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't going to let his lies be my ending. The truth had shattered me, but it also gave me something unexpected. A reason to fight. What would I do next? How could I rebuild after all of this? The days that followed felt like a blur, everything moving too fast. Yet at the same time, everything felt like it had come to a screeching halt. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to unravel this mess that Bob had left behind. But I had no choice. I had to move forward. David and I went through the documents together, sorting through the mess of Bob's financial life. He had been deep in debt for years, his failed investments, the loans against the house, and the credit cards in my name. It felt like I was looking at a stranger's life, not the life I had shared with the man I thought I knew. David kept apologizing, his voice full of guilt, but there was no need for that. He hadn't known. None of us had. And now all we could do was pick up the pieces. We'll figure this out, I told him, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, him or myself. We have to. We can't let this ruin everything. David nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe in the easy fixes Bob had promised, but there was still a part of him that wanted to. I saw it in the way he looked at the documents, hunting for answers, for solutions that didn't exist. We'd hire a lawyer. We'd fight the banks. But I knew in my heart that things would never be the same. The life I had built with Bob, the life we had both worked for, the years of memories had been built on lies. And the weight of that truth pressed down on me every single day. I had to confront the next battle. But the hardest part wasn't the debt or the courts. It was the silence from my daughter. Emily hadn't called since the funeral. A few days after, she had sent a brief text, but it was cold, distant. She wasn't ready to face the truth, or maybe she couldn't. The father she had known and loved for all her life, the man who had walked her down the aisle, had been a stranger in ways she didn't yet understand. When I first told her what I had found, her silence on the other end of the phone had been deafening. "Mom," she had said finally, her voice tight. "Are you sure? Maybe there's an explanation." I had paused, the weight of my words hanging between us. "I have the documents, Emily. I have his letter admitting to it, everything he did." But Dad wouldn't do this, she had whispered, still holding on to the image of her father as a good man, a loving husband. She couldn't reconcile the man who had always been there with the one who had betrayed us all. And I understood that. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the truth. It's accepting that the person you trusted with your heart is capable of something so devastating. David kept telling me she'd come around, that in time she'd see reason. But I wasn't so sure. People cling to the lies they need to believe, and Emily needed to believe her father was beyond reproach. I couldn't blame her. I had needed that belief once too. The truth was shattering Emily's world just as it had shattered mine. But how could I help her see what I had learned? That the people we love are often the ones who hurt us the most. Not because they're monsters, but because they're human. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. I spent my days with Jennifer, our lawyer, going through everything. Filing claims with the credit bureaus, contacting credit card companies, gathering evidence of the forged signatures. We even hired a handwriting expert, who confirmed what I already knew. I had never signed those applications. Those were Bob's lies, written in my name to hide his mistakes. David threw himself into helping me. He made spreadsheets, organized documents, attended meetings with me, his quiet determination a steady presence through the chaos. But Emily still refused to speak to me. It wasn't just the financial fraud that tore at her. It was the very fabric of her memories. Her father, the man who had taught her to ride a bike, helped her with her math homework, walked her down the aisle, had been a different person than she had ever known. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, David looked up from the pile of papers and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." I put down my pen and looked at him, my heart racing. "What is it?" "A few years ago, Dad asked me to invest in something with him. A tech startup. He said it was a sure thing, that we'd make a fortune. I had $50,000 saved for the kids' college fund. He wanted me to put it all in." My stomach dropped. "David, please tell me you didn't." "I almost did," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "But Sarah, my wife, didn't trust it. She said if it was such a sure thing, why did Dad need our money? We fought about it. I was angry with her at the time, but she held firm. I told Dad no." I closed my eyes, a wave of relief washing over me. "And you didn't lose everything?" David nodded, his voice quiet. "Sarah saved us. But I think Dad was already in trouble then. I think he was trying to use my money to fix his mistakes. If I'd said yes, we would have lost everything too." I reached across the table and took his hand. "But you didn't. And that's what matters." The truth kept unfolding, layer by layer, revealing the depths of Bob's desperation. But as each secret came to light, I began to wonder. How many more people had he dragged into his web of lies? And what would I do when the last of his secrets came crashing down? The court hearing was set for late November, 6 months after Bob's death. It was a cold, damp Thursday, and the threat of rain hung heavy in the air as I walked into the courthouse, my heart beating faster with each step. David came with me, his face a mask of concern. Emily wasn't there. She'd sent a text the night before. "I can't watch you do this to Dad's name." "I'm sorry," I had replied, trying to be understanding, though I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "I understand. I love you." But no reply came. I wasn't sure if Emily would ever truly accept what Bob had done, or if she would ever forgive me for speaking the truth. Inside the courtroom, everything felt small. Much smaller than I had imagined. The judge, a man in his 60s, listened patiently as both sides presented their cases. The bank's lawyer argued that as Bob's spouse, I had benefited from the loans, even though I hadn't signed anything. Jennifer, my lawyer, stood up with calm certainty and dismantled their argument piece by piece. She showed the forged signatures, the expert testimony, the separate accounts, and Bob's letter, the final admission of guilt. She painted a picture of betrayal, of a man who had used his family, his wife, to cover up his failures. And then Jennifer called me to the stand. "Mrs. Thompson," the lawyer asked, "when did you first learn about these loans?" I took a deep breath. "When I opened the safe deposit box after my husband's death." "Did your husband ever discuss taking out equity loans on your home?" "No," I answered firmly. "Never." "Did you receive any of the money from those loans?" "No," I replied, my voice growing stronger. The money went into accounts I didn't know existed. I never saw a cent of it. The bank's lawyer stood to cross-examine me, his polished aggression evident. Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that you trusted your husband with the finances? Yes, I said, meeting his gaze. I trusted him. And you chose not to be involved in financial decisions? I paused. I trusted him. That doesn't mean I chose to be defrauded. The lawyer pressed on, but I felt a quiet strength building within me. I wasn't going to let him twist the truth. I wasn't going to let Bob's actions be my shame. The court's decision loomed over me, but the battle was far from over. Could I truly win back what Bob had stolen? And even if I did, would it ever be enough? The courtroom was quiet as the judge reviewed all the evidence. I could feel the weight of every moment, every decision Bob had made hanging in the air. There was a deep silence, a heavy pause before the judge finally spoke. I've reviewed all the evidence, he began, looking at the bank's lawyer and then turning to me. The forged signatures, the expert testimony, the defendant's own written admission. While I understand the bank's position regarding spousal benefit, I cannot ignore the clear evidence of fraud committed without Mrs. Thompson's knowledge or consent. I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. The loans are void. The liens on the property are released. I heard the words, but for a moment they didn't register. My mind was still caught in the whirlwind of emotions, the betrayal, the shock, the devastation. But then, as the judge's words sank in, I realized, we had won. The house was safe. The debt, the burden Bob had placed on me was no longer my own. David grabbed my hand, his grip tight, and Jennifer smiled at me, her expression filled with quiet pride. But I felt nothing like triumph. The victory was hollow. I had won back the house, but it came at a cost that could never be repaid. A life that had been built on trust was now shattered, and no legal victory could ever change that. Walking out of the courthouse, I didn't feel the satisfaction of justice. I felt the weight of everything I had lost. The life Bob and I had shared was gone. The future I thought we'd have was no longer mine to claim. But in that emptiness there was something else, something that hadn't been there before: freedom. I had survived, and I would keep surviving. But the person I was before, who I thought I was, had died with Bob. The woman walking out of that courthouse was someone new, someone who had been forged in the fires of betrayal and loss, but also someone who had learned to stand on her own. It wasn't just the house or the money I had won back. It was my sense of self, my future, and my ability to rebuild from the rubble Bob had left behind. What would life look like now? Could I ever find peace in the aftermath? After the court hearing, I didn't feel the sense of triumph I had expected. No, there was no celebration. No moment of relief, no rushing sense of freedom. Instead, it was quiet. Almost painfully quiet. I had won the case, yes. But the world I had known for 38 years, my marriage, my trust in Bob, the life I had built around him, was gone. And what did I have now? A house that, though safe, felt hollow. A future I had to rebuild from the ground up, but without any map. David helped as much as he could, of course. He was there, sorting through what remained of Bob's financial mess, but the strain was evident. He had his own grief to deal with, and I knew this was a burden he hadn't expected to carry. I tried not to rely on him too much, but the weight of all of it was more than I could bear alone. Then there was Emily. She had stopped calling. After the court hearing, after everything that had come to light, I still hadn't heard from her. I wasn't sure where she was emotionally, whether she was still trying to hold on to the version of her father she had always known, or if she was too angry with me for uncovering the truth. It hurt. I hadn't realized how deeply her silence would cut me, how much I had depended on our relationship, even in the face of all the chaos. But despite everything, I kept moving forward. I found work. I started part-time at a small independent bookstore downtown. Ruth, the owner, was older than I was, but we clicked instantly. She had her own stories of heartbreak and survival, and slowly, her friendship began to fill the space Bob had once occupied. One evening, as I was shelving books, Ruth turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "I've been watching you. You're good at this. Helping people. Listening. You should think about running a support group." First, I thought she was joking. But as she spoke, I realized she was serious. Ruth had gone through her own version of betrayal, and her wisdom had helped me more than I could say. She saw something in me I hadn't realized was there, something I had forgotten after all the years of living in the shadows of Bob's control. I started small. Just a few women at first, women who, like me, had been betrayed by the people they loved most. Financially, emotionally. It started in the back room of the bookstore, just a circle of chairs, coffee, and stories. It wasn't much at first, but it was something. It was healing. As I listened to these women share their stories, I realized something. Surviving was not enough. We had to rebuild not just our lives but our identities. Could I really help these women see their worth again, just as I was starting to see my own? It was a month after our first support group meeting, when I began to realize how much this had shifted something inside me. The more I listened to these women, their stories of loss, betrayal, and survival, the more I saw that healing was not a linear process. It wasn't just about surviving the trauma. It was about taking back the power that had been stolen from us. It was about rebuilding not just our finances, but our entire lives, starting with the smallest steps and the quietest moments. Each week, more women showed up. Some I knew, others I didn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were all in the same room, each one taking the first brave step toward rebuilding what had been broken. One evening, as the group was wrapping up, a woman in her early 30s approached me. She was shaking, her eyes full of doubt. Do you think I could ever get my life back?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "I've been hiding everything from my family, from my friends. I don't even know who I am anymore." I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt that deep familiar ache that came with truly understanding someone's pain. "You can," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "You can rebuild. It might take time, and it might hurt more than you ever imagined, but you can do it. Just take it one step at a time, one day at a time. And remember, you're not alone." She nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes, and I saw the first flicker of hope in her gaze. She wasn't alone. None of us were. I had spent so many years letting someone else make decisions for me, hiding behind Bob's promises, trusting him to take care of everything. But now I was learning that I could make my own decisions. I could stand on my own feet, just as the women in my group were starting to do. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this journey had been easy, but it was worth it. The more I helped these women, the more I realized, sometimes the only way to heal from betrayal is to help others who've been hurt the same way. Could I help them rebuild their lives as I was slowly rebuilding mine?